Hey everybody, it's Matt from the house. In today's video, we're going to show you a little bit on how to buy skate trucks for your skateboard. So let's go ahead and check these things out. All right, so right off the bat, maybe you're getting your first board, or maybe you've had a board for a while and you want to get a new set of trucks, kind of soup up your old pair, or maybe you just got a pair that's worn out and you're not sure exactly how to buy them. It's pretty easy actually when it comes down to skate trucks. The more you skate, you will try out different kinds of trucks. All the trucks, they basically work about the same, but they all have different angles and things, certain feels as to how they ride and how they turn. And that's something that you really just have to just try out all sorts of different trucks over time to really figure out. If you're not too picky about it though, that's actually one of the best things ever, because you can just grab a pair of trucks and skate them and you're gonna like them pretty much no matter what, because you're gonna develop that riding style. But as to each company, if you've been skating for a while, you probably have a specific company. Stick with it. If you don't have any preferences, then pretty much you can just get about anything out there, and like I said, it's going to be good for your board. So right off the bat, we do have, some of the trucks, you do have different heights in them. That's usually just a personal preference thing, but it also can depend on your wheel size as well. So a little bit lower truck, and you'll notice it's not a lot lower, but usually you're going to be riding smaller wheels and you want something that's a little bit lower to the ground, a little bit more stability. If you go with the higher trucks, usually you're riding bigger wheels, not all the time, but usually you're riding a little bit bigger wheels, and the bigger truck gets you a little higher off the ground, and actually you can pop your board and get the nose of your board up a little bit quicker and a little bit higher, so it definitely can translate into ollieing higher as well, but also just getting that extra clearance. If you like to have your trucks really loose and you do ride small wheels, you get a little extra clearance from your wheels, getting that wheel bite where your wheel hits your board. So again, in the end of the day, it's personal preference. Some companies offer multiple heights in their trucks, some of them don't. Again, just a personal preference when it comes down to it. But biggest thing when it comes to trucks is make sure that you're getting the right width truck for your board. So right off the bat, we're gonna go ahead and grab this 775 blind deck, and on this board, basically what we want to do is we want to try to match up the width of your truck to the width of the board as close as possible. So you can kind of see on this one how that's pretty close right there. And this truck is it's a tensor, and this is the 5.0, which is a for 775 boards. And one thing to note also when you are measuring up your board and you are checking it, the nuts when they're on the end of the truck, sometimes they're on a little tighter, sometimes they're on a little looser. If they are on a little bit looser, it will actually make the truck seem like it's wider. So it's good to do one of two things: take the nuts off when you're comparing it. You basically just want to match it up to the width of the deck and get it as close as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. Or when you do set that board on the deck, if it does have the nuts onto it, just eyeball it and take into account that, that's probably going to be, a little bit narrower than what's actually, showing there with the nuts sticking off the side of the board a little bit. But again, try to get it as close as possible. So right there, we got a 775 board. Next up, this element here, we've got an 8-inch. And again, we're going with this Crux truck, which this one, again, we're gonna set it right on there, right at the wheelbase too. You basically want to do it right where your truck is going to be mounted. And why that's important is that the board can have different shapes, and sometimes boards do have a little different shapes. They can have something that can be a little wider towards the middle, and it tapers a little bit in the nose. Or sometimes it's just a completely different shape in the nose and tail. But you want to match up your truck mainly at that point where it's going to be mounted. If you do have a board that has a much wider nose and a little bit narrower tail, do it for the widest point of the board. Basically do it for the front. Usually it's the wider part is in the front. Match it up to the wider part in the front, not in the back. But again, most of the times these boards are going to be, most skateboards are somewhat symmetrical. They're not all completely symmetrical, but that width at the front and the back of your board is going to be roughly the same. And another thing to keep in mind also is that you are going to get into boards. So obviously we've got a 775 board with a 775 truck. We've got an 8-inch board with an 8-inch wide truck. And the other thing about these trucks too is they all have different ways of measuring their truck. Some of them measure by the hanger, some of them measure by the axle, millimeters, inches, all over the place. Good thing to know is we've cracked the code, and if you actually click on the sizing guides on our website, there is a sizing guide that will tell you, it'll give you the truck, it'll give you the actual size of what the truck company specifically calls it, and then it'll actually give you a suggestion for what width boards those are gonna fit. And why that comes into play is, right now this Tensor truck, this is basically around this is their 5.5, which is around an 825 width truck. So this primitive board that we have here is actually at 8.3. So again, we're trying to get it as close as possible. It doesn't have to match up exactly. It can be a little bit of a personal preference when you get to some of these as well. If we take this Indy, which is actually closer to a 5.5, and we put it on the board, you can actually, they're both pretty close. The Indy does stick out just a tiny bit more. The Tensor in a little bit. But again, just personal preference. You want to get it as close as possible. If your truck is a little bit wider, technically that's going to put your wheels out a little bit further, which is going to give you a little bit more stability. It's not going to turn as quick. If you do the little bit narrower truck, it'll bring them in a little bit more, which will give you a little bit tighter turning and less chance for wheel bite as well. So, but again, it's just personal preference when you do get to those boards that are those in-between sizes, like, 8.1, 8.3s, 8.4s. You're not your standard, most of the standard sizing on trucks going to be 775, 8, 825, 8.5, and then some of the companies go below that, some of them go beyond that, but those are going to be the standard sizes that most people are skating. And then likewise, obviously we get up to an 8.5-inch deck as well, and we drop that truck on there, that Indy 149, and it's going to match up pretty much perfectly with that 8.5. But again, just personal preference. If you want more stability, go ahead and put a bigger truck on there. The one thing about it is if your wheels are sticking out, the farther they stick out, the board's not going to turn as quick. Also, you run the risk of pushing and kicking your back wheels. If they stick out a lot, you definitely don't want to kick your back wheel because that stops your board and you keep going. Also, when you get those trucks that are a little too narrow for the board, again, personal preference. You actually, if you bring your wheels in, you actually get less wheel bite and your board does turn quicker, but you will lose a little bit of stability, especially on landings too, because it's a lot easier for you to actually tip your board if you're a little heavy on your toes or your heels, actually tip it over the end as well. So personal preference, but at the end of the day, find that truck that matches up closest with the width of your board, and that's the truck to go with. All right, well, thanks for checking out our video on how to size your trucks and, buy trucks basically for your skateboard. And if you've got any questions beyond what we covered in the video, any of the trucks or the decks or anything that's on thehouse.com, leave us some questions down below in the comments. We're on there every single day trying to answer your questions. We want to make sure that we get you into some good equipment, but we also want to make sure that your equipment works well too. Basically, it's a night and day difference when everything works properly. Also, like and subscribe, and definitely get that bell on, and find out when all the new videos drop. And hey, whether you're riding wide boards or narrow boards or anything in between, get some trucks that fit it right and get out and ride, because any day of riding is a good day riding.